Well, welcome everybody. So glad to be with you. And I know this is, talk about relevant and of utmost in our minds. And so I'm just glad to be with you and just share a couple of things that I have seen and to encourage you. And I'm sure Shelley is, the same thing. I'm going to share my screen. I believe you can still see us, even though I will share my screen. So let me do that real quick. And because I've got a ton of slides and things to show you. I spent Sunday from 6 a.m. Pacific time, which was when church was starting on the East Coast, till noon Pacific time, which is when most church was done, although I had some Sunday evening ones I watched as well, surfing Facebook Live and just seeing what everybody was doing. And mainly because I wanted to encourage people. So I was in everybody's chat saying, praying with you, all these things, but also wanted to just see what folks were doing, celebrate the ways that we are in big and small ways in bringing community across these boundaries. So I'm going to just share with you some of the things that I've observed, some of the things that I saw. And what I really want to say to you is that there is no one way to do this. And so if anybody tells you, let me show you exactly the way to do this, I think that's, we have to be careful of that. That's kind of a philosophy that came up when the contemporary movement came up, was like, go to this workshop and find out exactly what you need to do in your worship. Well, in the worship design studio, when I teach workshops, I am always saying that no one size fits all, that there are things that we can do to make worship sensory rich, which I think is important because we want to communicate in a way that reaches all the people, and not everybody learns and communicates in the same way, but we come from different contexts. And so those who are in a context where you just are not going to be able to get the fanciest equipment and the most, incredible shot, you just, I don't want you to worry about that, because there's so many ways to do it simply. And the point is to connect with people. So I really want to put that out there first, and you'll see from all my pictures and videos, there were many ways that people did it. And across the board, one of the things that I was watching was not only the live stream, but also what people were commenting. And across the board, in every situation, no matter how simple or complex or successful the live stream was, people were so grateful. And so that is the point to take away, is that all of our efforts, people are just grateful for that. And so let's take the anxiety out of it, the performance anxiety out of it, and just move forward with faith, knowing that we're doing the right thing to create that spiritual community across these boundaries. So this picture, I just saw on my Facebook feed last night, a priest who had asked people to send pictures of themselves in, printed them out, and put them in the pews. And of course, probably they're in exactly the spots where people sit, because we know where those are, right? But what it reminds me of is that, we can laugh about where people sit, but one of the things that I said to folks who were anxious about doing maybe live streaming the first time was, just take a moment and visualize your folks. You're just talking to your folks, right? It's no different than that. And that's the point. And so, speak directly to them. So I posted after my 6-hour-long marathon of being in church all morning, I said it was not canceled today. The church is alive and well and stepped up in big ways to offer connection. So, a lot of people have been asking me, well, shouldn't we just coordinate our efforts so that not everybody is doing this? And maybe we just go to have our people go to the churches that already have live streaming capabilities. And yeah, that's one thing you could do. But in my mind, I really think that people want to hear from their pastors. They want to feel like they're in their community. And because there are simple ways to do that, that almost all of us have access to, actually all of us, because we're going to talk about phone as well. There's no reason not to reach out personally. And so that's really where I come down, is like, it's not about perfection. It's not about, having the best bells and whistles. It's really about connecting with your folks. And I think that's one of the things I saw in the comments on Sunday morning, was just people were so grateful to make that personal connection with folks. So I'm really grateful to everybody who made the attempt. So people, we'll come back to these photos in a minute, but I just want to say people did it over phone, you know, just a phone connection, a conference call kind of thing. They did it with the camera way back and showing their entire sanctuary. They did it with, you know, finding just the right angle for just the worship leaders. They, you know, used their sanctuaries and was sort of halfway back, but enough to see some familiar setting and make people feel at home. They did it with just a couple of their worship leaders, you know, in this one, a pastor, and then the music leader would pop in, that kind of thing. So just so many different ways. This was a pastor who took my advice on, I had put out a little 10-minute video about creating intimacy and just being real when there's nobody in the sanctuary, not pretending to talk to an entire, you know, empty sanctuary. And he took this to heart. We can watch a little video of this later. And I think it was really effective, talking right to the camera. People did it in their homes, right? Just talking right to the cameras. And so very simply, just right from their desks, but connecting personally. This person did it this is like fireside chat. I love it. It's so creative, little fireside chat going on here. But it made it feel cozy and intimate and pastoral in a certain way. So there's so many different ways that you can decide to do it. These folks, unfortunately, they had it landscape, and then when they hit go, it went, you know, so we have to be careful of that. But the point is that for them, getting some leaders right around, because they had a lot of interactive, you know, they were modeling the same kind of energy as in their worship. So it was important for them to have a few people around. Now, you know, they may be further apart this next week. I don't know. We all have to figure out how we're doing this. This is a friend of mine who did a buddy bench, you know, just sitting on this bench for the next hour, and invited people to Zoom in. So just so many ways. This was someone who did Zoom instead of Facebook Live, and so was able to break people out into conversation groups, sort of checking in. How are you doing? We'll look a little bit more at that in a moment. So Shelley, I'm wondering, I pulled this from your Facebook page, and this has some pictures of what y'all were doing at St. John's on Sunday. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit. I know I didn't ask you ahead of time to do this, but we're improvising here, right?
Yes.
I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the decisions that went into the ways that you all did it, because I think the point is, in showing you the survey of the vastly different things, is that part of it is just discerning what's right for your community and your
Yeah.
space and your context. So tell us a little bit about what you all did.
Yeah, absolutely. We made the decision to try to comfort our folks as much as possible. And in doing that, we wanted to keep things the same as much as possible. So we started with the service that we had already planned, and figured out, you know, we're not going to have a full choir. We're going to have one singer and a piano. So what pieces can we still do, and what do we need to change? And then what we did is we took our bulletin and created 3 scenes. And I had a computer cart, which, by the way, I'm on the computer cart right now.
Yeah,
I had that
great
computer
idea.
cart that you can see. You see on the right hand side. Is Hillary, our senior pastor, giving the sermon, and the computer cart is up with a tripod. I mean, we decided to do this like 36 hours ahead of time. So this
Right.
was very last minute figuring this out. But we have a webcam on a tripod. And so we have that scene set up to where we could read the scripture and do the sermon. That was kind of our pulpit that we put over there because we wanted to have the stained glass windows, which are iconic. And part of who we are at St. John's. We wanted to have that in one of the shots so that people saw that. Then you also see the bottom left corner is the piano, and we had a second set there, a second shot area where we did all the music. And then to the left of that, which is on the right of that on your screen, you see the table, and many of us spoke from behind the table as well. So we transitioned between these 3 spaces, just like you would have a pulpit and a table and an ambo. to do that, and have some variety in what people are seeing. We also had to pay close attention, as you see that the plants that are there and the screen that's there, that's in front of an exit door that wasn't that pretty. So we were trying to add a few things, keep
Yeah,
some things the same, but add a few things in transition to
right.
still make it feel smooth. I would not recommend this if you don't have a steady cam or something to transition with, but this worked for us, and that's why we did.
But I mean, you did exactly. I mean, you found something that would roll, that would turn, that you could. I mean, it's really great, and the three positions,
Mhm.
really a great idea. And basically, you staged those three places.
Yes.
And I think the movement, just having a little bit of movement, not too much, but a little bit of movement from scene to scene,
Mhm.
it does so many things. I mean, what we know about filmmaking, and I'm not asking you to be filmmakers, but because that's the premise of my book. One of the things that we know is that the scene change keeps us engaged, and it helps us. It helps us to have some variety in what we're doing, what we're seeing. So that the scene change is really great, but not too much. I think it's brilliant. The little computer cart with the wheels on it, absolutely brilliant. And you
Thank
don't have to get on Amazon and get a tripod that's on wheels and all the fancy stuff. That was just a really great fix. Now, the staging that you did, one of the things that we want to talk about is, for instance, in Marin County, where I live, we're shelter in place, right?
yeah.
And it may be that, it's Al Roker did weather from his kitchen because he is
Wow.
quarantined. So if Al Roker can do it, we can do it.
Mhm.
But what you might want to do is, if that comes to be that that you're going to need to do it at home, some of these items could actually get transported to where you're going to do that in a different space, so that you get this continuity of,
Yeah.
as you said, the really special kind
Yeah.
of feel.
Yes.
And
We,
having
we did.
familiar objects is
Yeah.
really
Yes.
important to the brain in terms of familiarity. It doesn't matter if those objects are in a different space. The objects themselves are going to trigger in the brain this idea that, there's a little piece of church, there's a little piece
Yes.
of home.
Yes.
Yeah,
At
that's
youth
great.
group, we did youth group online on Sunday night, and at youth group we do Christ candle and pass the candle, and
Hmm.
it was beautiful. I picked up the candle that we always use in youth group, and I had it at home and had it lit there during Christ candle time.
Wow,
And we had youth that were going to run and get candles from their homes so that they could have a candle lit as well.
nice.
And we passed the Christ candle, so there was that touchstone of home and that symbol that was there that we kept
Yeah,
consistent.
yeah, that's right. And if you're a small enough group, and this would be true of churches that have a small membership, which can be really a blessing, to use Zoom where you can actually see people rather than the Facebook Live is one option. But in small group, keeping your small groups together, or even creating small groups, because it sounds like this is not going to be just a couple of weeks. So creating small groups that can Zoom together, and then everybody can see each other light a candle at the same time. Creating these ritual actions that we can do together, that helps us to get a sense of being together even when we're apart. Um, Great. Well, let me just continue on. This is just a screenshot of some of the comments. I'm teary-eyed. This is a worship service to remember. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. This almost felt more meaningful than being there in person. Beautiful service. Now, of course, it's. I think what this person is feeling is that sense of there's an extra layer of meaning. Um, so again, perfection is not the thing. Actually, just offering it is the thing, and there is going to be an extra layer of meaning because it means even more to us that we get to connect in some way. So just want to. That's just a way of encouraging and saying, whatever you can do, do it. This was somebody posted this on the Worship Design Studio page. I loved it. Some of my shut-in members who haven't been able to come could watch worship for the first time. This may be a new thing. So what's interesting is that I'm getting a lot of people saying to me, well, I've been trying for a long time to, get our church to Facebook Live or to live stream or whatever. and we've had resistance, and now people are seeing, really what it's all about, and how wonderful it is to keep people connected across the way. And then I also had, on Saturday, I had a lot of people connecting with me saying, I'm nervous about live streaming. This was on we have a Facebook page for the Worship Design Studio latest Lent series, Entering the Passion. And so there's a lot of interaction there, which is wonderful. And, lots of encouraging things. But, a lot of people were doing it for the first time. And again, just looking into people's eyes and, in your mind, remember calling up those faces. You're not just talking to voiceless, faceless people. It's your folks. So this is Marin County. I'm not there right now because I'm in residence, actually in my RV in Southern California. Was doing some research at the University of Redlands, which is now shut down. So I'm doing virtual research, and it doesn't matter where I am, but I'm in Palm Springs in my RV, so I might as well just stay. Because in Marin, it's a shelter in place, and I think that's going to happen in more places. But I pulled this up. This is from Marin, and it said a question about, are we going to have to shut down completely? And I think that essential infrastructure and minimum necessary operations may continue to work. And so I think that we are minimum necessary operations. I think that at every point we need to remember that it's essential to keep connected. It's essential to give what we're giving, and pastoral care will be even more important. But you may be doing it at home at some point. There's Al Roker. I mentioned him earlier, but he was doing weather from his home. He needs to be sheltered in place, so who knows, we may be doing it at home. And so all along the way, I want you to think about, I'm going to be talking mainly about showing pictures what people did in their sanctuaries, but we can adapt and do it in different spaces. So let's just start here. This is back to this picture of someone who used the phone. They have a lot of people who for whom technology and clicking a link to watch Facebook or YouTube or what have you would kind of blow their minds. And so she decided to do freeconferencecall.com. And this is actually Free Conference Pro is really what, I think there's several ones, but Free Conference Pro is what I have used. In fact, in the early days of Worship Design Studio, when it wasn't webinars and videos and things, this is back in the ancient days, I did podcasts, and I used Free Conference Pro to bring 4 guest experts together. And so it's super easy. It's free, obviously, that's in the title. But it's a great way to get people, you just give them the phone number and they can dial in. So, that can be an option if all of this other stuff is not going to be really compatible to your community. So Shelley, I know you were surfing yesterday on Amazon looking for technology. So if you are looking for some things, I posted on the Worship Design Studio Facebook page this morning, a really nice article by United Methodist Communications that had some suggested, just basic, really suggested kinds of things in terms of tripods, microphones, and sound, connecting your sanctuary sound into your computer. And so I put some of those pictures here, but you can reference the actual links if you go to Worship Design Studio Facebook page. That's one way to find that article. Shelley, you want to say a little bit about what you just got that's pretty basic, just to enhance what you already had?
Yeah, one of the comments that we had was just that sound was so difficult. The biggest thing that was difficult was having the balance between the piano and the singer. Our webcam was just not able to mix that correctly. I know nothing about this, so I sat down with my brother and had a conversation. Who he knows a lot more, and he got us to order the thing on the top left, which, I mean, seriously, I'm like, do not know much technology, but I know this for sure. We are plugging in our soundboard that's already there. We're using our mic system and soundboard with that's mixing the sound and getting the right balance that we're used to using, and doing 100-foot cord from that soundboard in the back of the sanctuary to plug it into this little mini mixer that this audio interface that's on will be attached to my laptop this week. So that's how we're trying to use what we have already and what we know, and also not spend a ton of money when this is not a permanent situation for us. So that's our solution.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to say about spaces, and I'll show you some videos in a moment about different audio problems, but it's also, it's really important to go in and experiment, right? So there are some spaces where if you're going to just create a backdrop, a sort of scene, a scenario like Shelley did, that you can actually just talk right into your computer, right into your phone, and you don't really need to be amplified, right? You can also, if you set it in the right spot and the piano is the right distance away, I mean, it's really about playing with it. You just have to try it out. There are some churches that use their sound system, but because they didn't patch it into their computer, and because their sanctuaries are so big and boomy, it's not going to be the same kind of effect in the space as it is a recording of it. And so if the camera's too far away, there's a lot of ways that audio can be really, really tough. So I would say, and I tell people consultants have opinions about everything. We don't have all the right answers, but we have opinions about everything. So I'm just going to tell you what, WWMD, what would Marcia do? And I would err for, if you can't get the sound right and you're not sure about all this equipment, I would err on being, whoever's speaking, being closer to the actual recording device, and playing with the actual placement of your instrument and your voice to get that right balance. But play with it, try it, not just recording it on your computer, but actually through Facebook Live or YouTube or whatever you're using. Just try it. So this is not, we're not going to get into all the technical stuff, and maybe in the chat, there's some technical things going on. I can't see the chat right now because I'm sharing my screen, but we're not going to get into, Shelley and I, neither one of us are experts on the technical stuff. And there are great articles elsewhere about that. So, it's really, really important, because no matter how good the content is, if it's difficult to watch, that's important, but we're not going to primarily stick with that. So let me just show you how some people were using their screens. Some people were already set up for live streams. So in this situation, they had a little, frame in a frame kind of thing. And then the words and the different things would pop up in that little square. And so they were already set up for that so that they could have it both on the screen and on the person talking. Some people weren't set up for that. And so they had a camera angle where they could get their screen as well as people speaking. And this one was actually, I think, quite successful at having both of those things on that. Some people would go to the screen, for the words when singing was happening. And some people had more of a shot like this. And again, there is no, production value. We're just, we want people to be able to participate. And so that is the main thing, is however you can invite people to participate, but play with those camera angles. This is a church where they don't have a screen in the sanctuary usually. And so they brought in a television so that they could actually have things on the screen. One of the problems with this, and this is another thing to test out, is that your camera, even if it's your iPhone camera lens, will kind of freak out if there are really bright things really close up. And so what would happen with this one is that every time there was something on the screen, it would make everything else really dark, because it adjusted for that brightness that was too close. So these folks may have to put their screen behind them or further away from the camera, because when there was nothing on the screen, then they had nice lighting where you could really see their faces, but it was a jarring difference. So you got to play with that as well. And this was somebody who just was at home because they were not well and they didn't want to go out. And so they had a camera right on their computer screen and had their slides right on their computer screen. So many different ways, again, to do that kind of thing. So before I go on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And let's just take a break and see what questions are happening, Jocelyn, if there's any that we can talk about. Ooh, there's lots of good stuff going on in the chat. Love that. Anything we want to stop and talk about now, Jocelyn?
I think a lot of people are really curious about the best way to show lyrics and liturgy. You talked about the TV. Would you recommend taking the time to create a PDF beforehand? Do you think that could be a little bit more successful for people?
Yeah, I think a both and. So some people, so if you can create a PDF of your worship guide or your script, even if you're doing one of my series, you'll have a script that will have all the words, which may be helpful for some folks who may have problems hearing or that kind of thing. But if you can create a PDF and have that at your website or somewhere where you can put that link in the chat and have people just click on that so that they can have that open at the same time they're worshiping, or print it off if they have multiple people at home, whatever you want to do. But yeah, I think that's a really great idea, is to put that in a PDF so that you're not reliant on kind of moving around if that's your situation. But there's also really good reasons to have it on the screen as well. So I just think always a both and, be thinking about, it's all about accessibility, right? So think about the end user and all the different scenarios that would be happening. If somebody's watching it on their phone because they're not on a bigger screen, then it's going to be difficult for them to open up a PDF and watch online. And so that's another good reason to have a both and. So it's really going to be based on your space and all the accessibility things you can think of. What else?
One note on that, we had someone who normally makes our bulletins in the office. He served as our comment moderator and kind of live bulletin. So
nice.
Something came up on the screen,
nice.
He would put in the comments, offertory prayer, Shelley, and below it would be the words to the offertory prayer. So if no one had to go in and try to fiddle with something else, it was there right in front of them. And people, if they were wondering where we were in the service, it came up. Our senior pastor joked that it was the bulletin made flesh in the comments right there.
Live. That's what we call vital worship.
Indeed.
When the worship guide comes to life in real time. Yeah, exactly. Right. Awesome. What else?
Other questions go, I feel like y'all are actually answering a lot of the questions that have been coming up during your presentation. There's a few technical questions that Andrew and I are working on helping answer. So I think we're good for right now.
Okay, awesome. So let's move on because we got some participation stuff coming up. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. Okay, so there were some decisions to have a wider camera angle where you saw sort of some people in the pews kind of spread out. I was ambivalent about this choice. Well, this one in particular, I was not ambivalent about because their camera was way too far back. It never did any close-ups, and the audio was really not good because they weren't patched in, and then they were too far away. It was boomy. It was just really difficult to hear. So again, the choice to have a camera closer up may be an audio choice as well. But I also was wondering, I'm not sure that it was really that heartwarming, and these weren't my spaces, so I just want to give that caveat. I'm not sure it was heartwarming to see empty pews, unless you're gonna sort of make it real and say, we're missing you here today. I know so-and-so, have a pastor walk down and I know so-and-so, I can imagine so-and-so sitting right here and so-and-so sitting right here, creating some sort of community. But I was kind of ambivalent about these shots with, scattered people in the pews. again, these are the folks who had a few people around. And again, it's going to be also dependent on your usual worship behavior. You know, if you have very formal worship, you know, it may be that you're not going to have a lot of conversation. Although I think that you can sort of break the mold. It's probably more the other way around, that like these folks would not just have one person. They needed these paraverbals. They needed this amen corner, right? What, speaking of the amen corner, I just was so delighted by the idea that, you know, the little emoticons in Facebook where you can click the, you know, the hearts and the likes and things. And so at a certain points, these things, we would have these bursts, right? And it was almost like, oh my gosh, Anglo people now have an amen corner that they feel comfortable with. You know, because somebody would say something and then these bursts of hearts and likes, you know, and so it was almost like the people from virtually saying amen, right? Anyway, so it also depends the personality and the feel of it, whether it's contemplative, whether it's whatever. You know, and I found it comforting for people to be real about, yeah, this is really anxiety producing, but also not so serious that that it didn't feel like we were happy to be together in this way, not so sorrowful that we were coming through the screen. And so this buddy bench, and so one of the ways I want to talk about is that a both and could be that you don't just do it on Sunday morning. And I love this idea. My friend created the virtual buddy bench, and so every once in a while she's going to be in that same place. And you know, we as humans love ritual, and ritual are these repeated patterns that help us identify with something. Our brains love patterns, and so doing something that's, you know, from the same place um, on a regular basis could also be a way of continuing that throughout the week. And even if people are not on live, it's there and they know, come to the church page whenever you need a lift and watch this. So thinking about that. So here's somebody else. I will be hosting conversations through Zoom several times this week for folks to share, talk, connect, and hear one another. So again, that small group option is really wonderful. Here's me doing a little Facebook Live on my walk, you know, and some people are getting out into nature, and it really does make a big difference to get out there. Encourage people to do that, or for people who are feeling sick and are not going to go out, actually giving them a virtual walk in nature would be a wonderful way to bring the spirit to them. So let me just get into some pointers about some of these pictures. These are just folks at home, but one of the things that we need to remember, if you've not done this very much, is that we don't want something that looks like this. If you're looking at my live camera, now we've got half of my face in the ceiling because I haven't paid attention to the angle. One of the things you want to do is to have yourself framed nicely, about there and top of the head kind of thing. And then you might have to put a book underneath your computer or that kind of thing to make it right. Think about your background so that you're not like this fellow who has the light halo on his head. Think about where you are and make sure that the light is not wonky, kind of thing. So I did this direction in my RV rather than the other way because there's a window back there. And if I have a window behind me that's brighter than me, it's the camera lens is just going to freak out. So just remembering about some simple things like that. This is another person who is doing Facebook Live in the sanctuary, which is fine. But what we have in most of the picture is a very plain white background. Now, when we're in the sanctuary and we are able to look at many things, that's not a big deal. But when we're framing out a picture, we want to think about what's in the frame. And so creating a backdrop. So these are some folks who are worship design studio members. They watched my video, my little 10-minute video about creating some color and some symbols within the frame. And so they, like Shelley's church, they looked at it and they decided what would be, and these are all things that have to do with their series. And so they moved them in the sanctuary from where they normally are so that they could be in the frame of the shot. So thinking about that kind of thing. It's also easier on the eyes. When you have a lot of white space in the background or a lot of white space that's filling up the frame, it's harder to look at. Just our eyeballs find that difficult. This is why when we do slides, we want to do more white lettering on a darker background rather than the other way around, so that our eyes are not freaking out. So this is another church that did the same thing, watched my video and came up with some scenarios like Shelley's church did. And this was what was there when they came on. Now, I think what we want to one of the things we want to pay attention to is the bookends, the beginnings and the endings. There were some churches like this one that had a really wonderful, came on about 10 minutes, 5 minutes before they were going to start. They had their musicians playing in the background, and they had a camera shot on something really beautiful. So people could get on, they could make sure they were on, they could say hello in the chat. There were other churches that had the camera on, and the people were just walking around, kind of yucking it up and going, what verse are we going to sing? And, so it felt a little bit, again, it doesn't have to be slick, but it's about creating a worshipful environment. And so think about, I think they were just not thinking that, oh, I'm being seen, right? So here's somebody wrote in their chat, you're a pro at this. And the Bible cross and candles with stained glass backdrop is very nice. So people are noticing it, right? It makes a difference for them. You're creating what people are going to, you're creating sacred space, the same way you care for your sanctuary space. This would be true if you end up doing it at home. I would say to this church, bring exactly this scenario that you had and bring it and reproduce it in your home. You could even get so fancy as to, and it doesn't take that much, take some photos of that, of the stained glass. And Shelley was talking about stained glass. Take some photos of that. And if you have a way to connect your TV to your computer, which many people do, an HDMI cord from one to the other, you could have a picture of that stained glass on your TV at home and have that slightly in the picture. Not that it would change up, but would just be there. And so you're recreating that in the moment. So this church had, so let's look at this. So they had one camera placement like Shelley's. And so this was one of their shots. Then they could just quarter turn it, and here's their shot of their musicians. I would actually turn this piano sideways a little bit so that we don't just see the top of her head, but we can see her, a profile of her playing. Any emotion, motion creates emotion, right? So if we can see the pianist's hands playing or more of that embodied, we get that feel of the music, especially virtually. That's really helpful. And then it just swiveled around, and this was the shot for the sermon and for prayers and that kind of thing. So camera in the same spot, but able to just easily swivel it and create those three different scenarios. Shelley, interrupt me if you have any thoughts as I'm going along here.
I will, but go for it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's some shots of some folks that chose to be where they normally are in the sanctuary, to preach and to lead, which is fine. There's some merits there, but I would definitely move that camera so that you're talking right into the camera. I think that, people knew there wasn't anybody in the space, so it's a little awkward. It's a little less personal. And I know this is our, as if we're sitting, and maybe the thought is as if we're sitting in the pew and looking from our usual spot. But I think for virtual worship and for that personal connection, I would make a different choice. This church did a lovely thing with just their chancel area and being able to get the screen in that so people could sing along there, and then zooming in. So let's say that one of the music stands is where the preacher then is going to be. I wouldn't leave it in this wide shot. I would zoom that in and reorient, not to the pews, but reorient right to the camera and talk right to the camera. Again, here's an example of a wider shot. And fine for seeing the somebody came up and lit those candles, that kind of thing. But I think it's a little too far away to get really that personal kind of feeling. So again, using that zoom for different places. And friends, what's important is to go through your order of worship and plan these things out, right? Do a cue to cue. Here's just a lovely shot of the candle in front of the pulpit. And again, this would be a nice shot for prayer. We don't always have to have a talking head, right? So, so giving a nice shot, or even you could do this and then invite people, especially if you've invited them to light a candle, invite them to use the candle as a focal point for the prayer, and then use light metaphors in that prayer. And so bringing people into that as much as possible. These folks actually did their procession with their cross and their candles like they do every Sunday. And yes, we saw the camera zoomed with them and we saw them processing in an empty sanctuary, but to see that happening brought a little bit of that familiarity and like, life still goes on, and the church is here and we're here. So I thought that was actually a lovely choice. Creating a backdrop. Again, this is a church that had a camera in one spot up on the chancel, and so they had a shot of the musician in profile, and then pastor was able to come into that shot, and they had their candles there for candle lighting. So let's talk about the people at home, because that's really what's happening. We want to think about the end user, we call them, the people, the participants at home. And so I love these, like the dogs are hanging out, for worship, and people are hanging out together. They're like on the beanbag chairs, and here's the pajamas and the coffee cup, right? Somebody put on Facebook, oh my gosh, pajamas. And I said, yeah, we might have to change our dress codes. People are going to get used to worshiping in pajamas. And then here's, of course, the waffles and worship. Waffles and worship, that there's a catchphrase. So here's that thing we were talking about as people were coming on. Somebody says, I know I'm showing my age, but I was so tempted to be Miss Sally and look into the camera and say, I see you, Karen. Oh, and there's John, just like Romper Room, right? But I think actually, as people are coming on before you start, it's really important to have somebody in the chat who's saying, hey there, and calling people by name and inviting people to say hello in the chat. So here's just some of my suggestions about the chat. Have somebody there inviting people to say hello, to actually interact there. A lot of people are not used to that. So I saw some churches that I know have older members. They were on, there was like 100 people on, but nobody was saying anything in chat. It's like, people are not used to it. But so you have to prompt people sometimes. And this is a good reason to come on early. People are going to come on early, make sure they can get on. But invite people to do things. So have somebody who's doing chat ministry, right? Like I know is going on right now in this. Have someone assigned to the chat who can welcome by name, add pertinent links that people might need, like a worship guide, that kind of thing. And then ask some people to model your chat requests. So if you're doing prayer requests, the same church that I was talking about invited people to put prayer requests in the chat, and it was like crickets. And so I was like I felt bad. I was like, okay, let me put some prayer requests in there to sort of model that. But as we're learning to be interactive, that it's okay to like have a voice in the chat during worship, have some people, prompt them to model that for folks and get that going. And be very clear about that when you talk, like when you're inviting people. I know this is a new thing and we feel like we can't speak out loud in worship, but actually we can speak to one another through chat. And so let's go ahead and put those prayer requests in. And then maybe invite people to stay for chat coffee hour afterwards, when people might feel more inclined to check in with each other and really say how they are, and make sure there's people. Does anybody need anything? Our youth are going to be running errands for folks. Let us know right now. Do you need something? And we'll get in touch with you. We'll hook you up with a youth. So one more thing, then Shelley, I'm going to have you talk about children and family and kids. This is a friend of mine who was doing a sermon, and she was talking about different vases, different pieces of pottery. And here she's telling a story about a coffee mug that she made at one of those paint your own pottery places. And I thought, oh, what a great opportunity that would have been to say, go to your cupboard right now, or go somewhere. Is there a special coffee cup, or is there a special something, a vase? Is there a special vase that you want to, chat about? tell us what it is that you have, and you put that in chat. So at every moment, trying to figure out how you can incorporate the symbols and stories about things. Even encourage people to a 1-sentence story, or what I call a 3-sentence story about something, their favorite coffee mug or their favorite whatever it is that you're incorporating. It's not just random, but it's incorporated into what you're preaching about or what you're doing in worship. So finding those ways to make it really more interactive than you can actually be in worship in the sanctuary. There are possibilities for what we would do in this context that we could never do, right? If we're just without our coffee cups where we are, we didn't bring our things. So there's that. So Shelley, tell us a little bit more about what you have to say. You sent me some of these pictures, so I put them in here, about how we can incorporate all ages in this.
Yeah, so just like you were saying, that this is an opportunity for people to bring different things and to participate in sensory rich ways that we can't really do because of the confines of the sanctuary. This really applies to children especially. Like I had a friend who participated in worship in her child's playroom on Sunday morning, and so she has one very similar to this top right picture that's about that age, and so that child was able to participate in worship in those ways. That family was able to be with their child, and worship was able to meet them where they are in a beautiful way. I love this. I saw this picture of this girl bringing Elsa and maybe an Olaf. I don't know, but I loved this idea of bring your friends, and you can ask children to bring their friends, as many as they want, since you're not trying to wrestle with a car seat and other things on Sunday morning. Encourage them to bring their friends, and in the chat box you could also take pictures of this, and children would love if you're taking pictures of what friends did you bring to worship today, and share those in the chat box. That really helps connect people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a friend of mine, Brandon. This is their daughter, Addie. And they decided to create a space, because you don't have the pews necessarily to define a space for children to be in worship. And so he got out their yoga mat and placed it on the ground so that they would have kind of a defined space. Like, this is our pew sort of for this Sunday. And this is his daughter, Elsa, wearing exactly what she wanted to wear during prayer time on Sunday morning. So participating and embodying those prayers in that space was a beautiful thing that they were able to do in a unique way on Sunday morning. Give suggestions of how people can use their own supplies. Give suggestions of things that they could draw or paint during the sermon. They can doodle pray, like have a free form doodle prayer of things that come up for them, things that they want to bring and lift up. Or if you can have specific imagery, think ahead of time before the sermon, and even tell children before the sermon, today we're going to be talking about the woman at the well. So can you draw water, or your favorite place where you come into contact with water? Those kinds of symbols, have them go through that symbol. And this sidewalk chalk picture in the middle is an idea. Just if you are stuck at home, have a message when you're passing the peace on the at the end of the service. Encourage people to pass the peace in a very unique way. We're doing that we have to be creative about how we're doing it at this time. But to have that idea of how children can take that passing of the peace and take it outside with sidewalk chalk, and people are going to be taking walks through their neighborhoods, pass the peace and greet people in that way.
Yeah, affirmations. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
See, there we go.
Yeah, children's Bibles. If children can go grab their Bible, their kids' Bible, and encourage them to be in their Bible, either during the time that the scripture is read, or anytime, just for them to make that connection of this is church that's happening here in my space too.
Yeah, when you're creating that sacred space, with special items and preparing, putting on your favorite outfit or whatever, have them bring that Bible as well.
When they bring their friends, read the Bible.
Yeah.
And this idea of this is not something you can typically do in the sanctuary, but you can do this here, and you can model having sacred time and prayer time in a different space than you normally would on a Sunday morning. Ask the kids to lay on the floor. Ask the parents. Ask anybody to lay on the floor and really breathe and relax during prayer time and get centered and grounded in that way that they can in their homes.
It's a really great opportunity to incorporate body prayers because people can do it on their own without anybody seeing them, you know? Yeah. And we're all going to need to have those anxiety lessening kinds of things. So incorporating that's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else, Shelley, before we move off of kids and children and youth?
I would just say that this is a unique opportunity for them to understand that God doesn't live in the church.
Yeah.
God doesn't just meet us in the church on Sunday morning, but that God is everywhere and in our daily lives. And for children to know that they can worship God and be in prayer wherever, I think is really important. It's a unique opportunity for us to embody that in this way.
You know, and if you're lucky enough to have children and youth ministers at your church, you know, a really great thing for them to be doing during the week is creating sort of a coloring page that has to do with what you're going to do in worship and has some, you know, what object do you want them to get and to incorporate and some ideas for families. So what a great way to, and I mean, that's something that if you're not doing it already, you could incorporate beyond this this quarantine time.
Yes.
So I think it's a real opportunity for us to get creative and then continue to see how we can incorporate that beyond.
Yes. There are a couple links as well that I'll share in the chat of people that are providing free resources and some really creative resources. I know that Tracy Smith put out some really beautiful things just today, and Illustrated Children's Ministry is doing some things for free. So I'll just put those links in the chat in just a bit if y'all are looking for some of those resources.
So I know we're getting close to an hour. So let me just say, let me just go ahead with this. So Ben, who is our worship design studio customer service person, also is a pastor at a church, and they played with Zoom and having people on live and splitting out into conversation groups, and they learned a lot. There's some things they'll do differently, but it gave them a chance to be able to take some time and people to talk to each other. They had liturgy, but also you know, these instructions in the worship guide, you know, type in any greetings you feel called to utter in the chat box. The peace of Christ be with you. And then conversations, you know, what do you or those you know need right now? What unique ways can we help the most vulnerable among us? So this was part of what they invited people to do. And because they were on Zoom and people were actually able to come on camera, go off, talk, because they were smaller community, they were able to do that. And so that's another idea, or actually incorporating that into small group things during the week, just to keep people connected. I wanted to say just a word about, you know, communion for United Methodists, at least, that may do communion once a month. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. And so this is a whole other line of conversation about communion. I know we have some PCUSA, that may be your situation as well, that you don't do it weekly, but there's also United Methodist and PCUSA churches that do it weekly. I know we have a ECLA, a Lutheran church on, and typically you do that weekly. I want to say to United Methodist folks that this situation may bring up a conversation that was kind of dropped a little bit a while ago. There was a whole conversation in scholarly papers and all this kind of stuff around online communion many years ago. And it was brought to the 2016 General Conference. It died in the Faith and Order Committee. And so really nothing has been done about it. But there was a moratorium on online communion that was that the bishops put in place until it was studied further. Well, it was studied further and then really nothing happened. So we're kind of without some very specific guidelines about this. And it's not just theological, philosophical conversations. It's about our ecumenical partners and being in communion with ecumenical partners and what. So this is something I think that is a conversation that I'm going to, I have emailed several people who are in that conversation recently, and they didn't get back to me before this morning, so I can't further this conversation. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this week, I'm going to create something I call comfort food, a love feast, that people could use on that first Sunday of the month. Because I think that there's many ways to break bread together, a virtual potluck, maybe we might call it. And no matter how you feel about, the sanctity of communion across the airwaves, or what constitutes community, or what constitutes presence, all of those things, I think it's important for us to break bread together in some way. And so there are many, I'm going to create this. I've already started yesterday. I started thinking about how I would do it. I've done this many times. So it's not from scratch, but inviting people to share with each other. I put a picture here of last night I had to have comfort food. I'm on a nutrition program, but it went out the window because I needed comfort food. And so Swedish pancakes is it for me, right? So it could be this whole idea of what brings you comfort, spiritual comfort, physical comfort, and a virtual potluck. And it could be really quite wonderful and bring up stories of Jesus, because Jesus' table ministry extended to many other things besides that Last Supper. So just know that I'm creating that in some way. I'm also going to do probably next week, my own webinar on Holy Week and Easter online, and what we might do special around that, because it looks like that this is going to affect Holy Week and Easter. Let me just say a couple of things before we end. This is really important. Some people are broadcasting YouTube videos of, for instance, this one was a contemporary Christian song. You don't have permission, even if you have a live stream license, to do that. So you can live stream, if you have a live stream license, this is particularly CCLI, because that's contemporary Christian music. One license has given a free limited time live streaming license. You need to sign up for it at onelicense.net. CCLI has not. You need to buy that. I think they have a discount going on. But even if you do have a live stream license, which is not the same as your one license and CCLI for printed stuff or projected stuff in your sanctuary, live stream is different. You do not have, and you'll see right in the middle of that, activities not permitted, to stream artist or record label recordings of songs. So it's not kosher to stream, say, a YouTube video of the actual artist, their official video. That is not covered under live streams. So you need to have your musicians doing it, or you could put the link of where it is in the chat and then just invite people to go listen to it on their own and you not broadcast it. You could do, as a friend of mine said, you could Rex Harrison it. So that's a reference to My Fair Lady and how Rex Harrison can't carry a tune. So the music was playing behind him and he just sort of spoke the words on top. There are many things you can do, but you can't live stream just something on YouTube by an original artist. There are somebody did this live stream of a beautiful video that had God Be With You Till We Meet Again, which is in public domain, but is the streaming of somebody's version of it. So there's many different levels that you have to check out. Now, one thing it's an actual video. Okay. So what I did is I tracked this back, and in the UK, they do things called Big Sings, the Big Sing. And so this is an online Big Sing, and these are all public domain hymns that they've put to music. And I have actually, you can contact people through their channel, and I have sent them an email. I didn't get one back this morning before we went on, so I can't tell you what the answer is, but I asked them, I said, can we live stream these videos that you have put together? So it's not clear on their website whether or not they are, but you can actually email people and ask their permission, right? So I encourage you to do that. All right, friends, I know we're, okay. We are getting to the hour mark, so I'm just going to, I have a ton of other things, but I want to just finish off with top tips. That is, do what I call a cue to cue rehearsal. Walk through with your person who's going to be doing the camera. Where are the shots? What are you doing? Test it out, rehearse. Good communication between those who are leading worship and those who are shooting it. Make sure you know what you're doing. It just helps everybody feel more present in the moment. It's not so it can be slick, but so that we can be more present and bringing the content alive, right? And so do a little run through of it. Make sure check your sound, do a live test of it. You can always take those down off of your Facebook page afterwards, or not publish it, but you want to be able to test it out. Give people, like, I love this shot from behind the table. There are shots that people will never get when they're sitting in the pews. So take this opportunity to think creatively about how you offer people the POV, the point of view. Take some of the things that are in the space, if you have to do it at home, and take them home with you. Create that space, some continuity and things. And then this is lovely. Be sure that those who are working really hard to bring this to folks, have some debrief time afterwards. It's really, really important that you care for the spiritual needs. This is my friend's church, and she said people were really in tears afterwards. So just checking in with each other and caring for those who are doing that in this space. And then I wanted to end with this prayer, but Shelley, I want you to, what are your final words here before we go off?
I would say, like, one thing I've been just meditating on since Sunday was just how to mitigate anxiety and nervousness. There are so many folks who are so nervous in this. I know that all of us as a staff were really nervous, and it made me think of Brene Brown writes of when she was really nervous going on stage once, and instead of, with her research on brains, she said it's the same chemicals that are at work when we're nervous and when we're excited. So I just say, I'm excited I'm excited to reframe her nervous energy into something that's excitement and helps her get centered. And so that's what I've been reminding myself of in the process. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's right.
That we who are merely inconvenienced, remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors, remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home, remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making the rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close, remember those who have no options. May we who have to cancel our trips, remember those that have no place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market, remember those who have no margin at all. May we who settle in for a quarantine at home, remember those who have no home. And a prayer for all of us that as fear grips our country, we will choose love.